Hi everyone, my name's Jen, I'm an author and a book reviewer, and I'm here today to start a reading vlog where I read the Booker Prize 2024 Longlist. I am not sure when you're seeing this video, but as I'm filming this, it's the end of July and the Booker Prize have just sent me the list of books, and also they have asked publishers to send the books to me in the post. I have not opened that email, I have not opened the books myself. I got Mr. M to unpackage them and put them in a box, which is currently at my feet, so I'm going to discover what the books are at the beginning of this video, and then we're going to dive into the reading part of the video as well. I really enjoy following along with prizes. I've worked in the book industry now for over 15 years is a phrase that I've been saying for quite a long time, so maybe I need to work out exactly how long it's been, because maybe it's 20 now. Anyway, irrelevant. I've been working in the book industry a long time, and prizes can be a lot of fun. As I said, I write books, so they're fun from well, or maybe stressful from a writer point of view, but I've also worked with prizes over the years, both as a book reviewer but also as a judge, and I thought maybe at some point in this video we could talk a little bit about my experience with prizes just in general, because I think they can be a little bit of a, I don't know, what would be the word? They're not misunderstood, but I think they can be a bit of a puzzling thing and a bit of an intriguing thing, and I don't know, I feel like I've got a few amusing anecdotes of my experiences over the years, so maybe we can have a chat about that over a cup of tea. I make videos on this channel about lots of things, about books, about disability, about fairy tales, about loads of stuff, but I do occasionally make vlogs where I read and review the entire long list of a prize. I've done that with the Booker for the past few years. In fact, I reviewed all of the shortlist of the Booker back in 2015, I think that was the first year I did it, which was 9 years ago now, and I more regularly do the Women's Prize, also the Jaluk Prize, the Forward Prize, the, what else do I do? The International Booker. But for the past 3 years I have been doing the entire Booker Prize long list, and it's been keeping me company through various different things. So the first year that I did it back in 2022, I was waiting to hear back from the IVF clinic about our most recent round of IVF and how many embryos we would have, and that was a very good distraction for me during that time. I don't think I even mentioned it at that time, but that's what was going on then. Then last year I read the entire long list in the first, no, it was the second month of my pregnancy, and I was feeling ill. There was a lot of sickness going on, and I was also extremely anxious because I honestly didn't think that I would be carrying the pregnancy to term, and that was a brilliant distraction then too. This year I have a daughter and she is 5 months old now. I do not know where the time has gone. It's ridiculous. So I am going to be quite strict this year with how I'm going to approach this video, she says, already waffling. Anyway, I am going to give each of these 13 books at least 1 hour of my time. Now, don't click away thinking this is just me sampling books and I'm only going to tell you what I think at the very beginning of each of them. That's not the plan. I just mean I am going to read each book for an hour. If I'm not enjoying them at that point, I'm going to have a good word with both myself and the book and decide whether or not I'm going to continue reading it. And if I am enjoying it, obviously I will continue reading it, but I'm going to have to be quite cutthroat this year. Time is limited. I'm going to be filming this video during nap time, so it may be a little bit disjointed because nap times suddenly abruptly end with no warning. So if it's a bit jumpy, you know, this is just life. I mean, it's always been just life, but this is current life right now. Stripped back Jen, I think, is what I'm calling these videos. Not a whole lot of B-roll, going for walks and cooking and all that stuff, just the chatting about the books. So, does that tell you everything you need to know? If you're new, hi, hello. I'm sure we will become acquainted with each other over the course of this video. I think we should just dive into the books because I'm excited about this box of books that I have not yet peered into. And also, I will go through these books relatively quickly in this section because even though they're new to me, you're watching this probably at least a month down the line, and you, if you follow the Booker Prize, will already know what these books are. So you don't need to hear me talking about the premise of them in great detail. Oh, thoughts, okay, predictions as to what I think could be on this year's list. There's a new Rachel Khong There's a new Chigozie Obioma. I've heard really good things about Kaveh Akbar's book Martyr. I've read his poetry before and really, really loved it. Everyone has been really excited about Percival Everett's new novel James. I have read a couple of his books before. I've read his poetry, Swimming, Swimmers, Swimming, and I've also read his book The Trees when it was shortlisted for the Booker Prize a couple of years ago. I like his writing. I haven't read Huckleberry Finn though, which is why I haven't picked up James. If it is on this year's list, I don't think I will read Huckleberry Finn before diving into it. I'm being presumptuous. I have no idea if it's on the list, but it's just, it seems like it probably is going to be just from all of the buzz, but we'll talk about that if it is, because maybe redundant. What else? I have heard amazing things about Orbital by Samantha Harvey, whose work I've also read before and been a bit unsure of. There's a new Tommy Orange, there's a new Richard Powers. I'd be really surprised if Andrew O'Hagan's book isn't on this list. Again, just going by everyone's reaction to it. That has garnered a lot of praise. And speaking of prizes, I judged a prize with Andrew O'Hagan before. He's a lovely chap. I judged the Costa with him back in 2016, but yeah, that's a really big book as well, like as in size-wise, very big. So we'll see if that's in this box as well. Anyway, let's stop speculating. Let me just reach into the book. It's like a tombola. I'm just going to reach in and pull a book out. Okay, first thing we have, Wild Houses by Colin Barrett. Colin Barrett has written a short story collection before, which I have not read. I've heard very good things about this book. Let me quickly peer at the blurb. Isn't it funny how sometimes you can see a cover knocking around, and I've heard about a book multiple times but have no idea what it's about. I did not know that this was about a simmering feud between two drug dealers, but apparently that's what this one is about. That premise, I have to confess, does not intrigue me hugely, but we'll see. Then we've got Rachel Kushner. I've never read Rachel Kushner before. This is Creation Lake. Quite a big one. I don't think this one is out yet. Well, this is an uncorrected proof. I think this one, is out in September. Not all of the books are probably going to be released at the time of the Longlist announcement, which I know is super frustrating, but it's just because of eligibility dates. Sometimes publishers try and quickly release a book if they know that it's been longlisted. I don't know if that will happen with this one. Anyway, the blurb on the back is extremely vague. It just says, what is it people encounter in their stark and solitary 4 a.m. self? What is inside them? Not politics. There are no politics inside of people. The truth of a person under all the layers and guises, the significations of group and type, the quiet truth, underneath the noise of and opinions of beliefs, is a substance that is pure and stubborn and consistent. It is a hard white salt. This salt is the core, the 4 a.m. reality of being. Am I intrigued by that? I'm not sure, but we'll find out once I start reading it. We have got one that I predicted. So this is Playground by Richard Powers. I tried to read the Overstory years and years ago when it came out. I loved the idea of it, but I just, for some reason, didn't enjoy the book itself. I would obviously like to try reading this one. I believe that this is for the sea what the Overstory was for forests. So yeah, that's all I want to know before diving in, to be honest. Then we have The Safekeep by Jelle van der Wouden. This sounds like it is by a Dutch author. Yes, so this is by a Dutch author, written in English, because it has to be written in English to be eligible for the Booker. And it's their debut. It's a historical fiction novel set 15 years after the Second World War, set in the countryside about a woman called Isabel whose brother delivers his graceless new girlfriend Eva at Isabel's doorstep as a guest there to stay for the season. And I think that they clash. Or maybe this is a queer story too. Maybe they fall for each other. I don't know. Okay. Intrigued by that. Then we have Held by Anne Michaels. I have never read anything by this author before. This is another war novel, but this time the First World War. So we've got part of it set in 1917, where John lies in the aftermath of a blast, unable to move or feel his legs. And then 3 years later, he returns to his home in North Yorkshire, alive but not whole. Okay. We'll see how the disability representation is in this. It says it's a narrative that spans 4 generations, which seems very ambitious for a novel that's only 200 pages. So let's see how well it accomplishes that. Clearly people think that it accomplishes it quite well if it's on this list. Oh, then we have Claire Masood. Now I think her novel, The Woman Upstairs, was the longest standing novel on my TBR shelf until I unhauled it last year. I can't even remember why I had that book in the first place, why I didn't get around to reading it, or even why I unhauled it in the end. I think it was just because it had been there for so long and I never felt the urge to pick it up. So I've never read any of her writing before. Clearly I meant to at one point. I believe this is another historical fiction, do we think? Judging by the cover, yes, June 1940, as Paris falls to the Germans. I have to say, I'm not hugely drawn to World War I and World War II novels. So we've got, what, 3 of them so far? Though I suppose the Safekeep really isn't set during the war itself, is it? So yeah, June 1940. This strange and eventful history charts a family's unfolding story as its members move between Salonika and Algeria, the US, Cuba, Canada, Argentina, Australia, and France. So again, very ambitious, but this one is longer. Not hugely excited about this. Again, we'll give it a go. Another book that I guessed, we have Orbital by Samantha Harvey. This has been getting such amazing reviews. I know it's about 6 astronauts who are orbiting Earth. It's tiny. I am hoping it's maybe going to be a little bit like The Employees by Olga Rowne, which was one of my favourite books of last year. We shall see. Then, this is intriguing. We have Enlightenment by Sarah Perry. I read her book, The Essex Serpent. Really loved her writing on a sentence-based level. Wasn't particularly drawn to Melmoth. Gave her debut a go after the flood. And that one wasn't my cup of tea either. This one I know is about religion, space, and I was going to say faith. Religion is faith, but faith in lots of different things, in people as well as in religion, and a friendship, I think, between a young girl and an older man. Interesting that that one has made the list. Then, oh yeah, we have Wandering Stars by Tommy Orange. This was another one of my guesses. I think this is a follow-on to There, which I have not read. I believe with Tommy being on this list, he will be the first Native American who has been longlisted for the Booker. I'm a little bit apprehensive about reading it simply because I haven't read There, and I won't be reading it before reading this, because I think when I've judged prizes before, some of the criteria that we have to consider, and I'm sure this is probably the case for the Booker as well, is that a book has to stand on its own 2 feet. It can't rely on other books in a series, for instance. It has to be enough as a standalone to warrant winning the award. So I would like to go into it with that in mind, and not just because my time is limited, though that I suppose is also another factor, but I think it's important that a book can represent itself. Okay, then we have My Friends by Hisham Matar. This, again, is not a book that I had predicted. Ooh, I really like the opening paragraph of the blurb. It says, Khalid and Mustafa meet at university in Edinburgh, 2 Libyan 18-year-olds expecting to return home after their studies. In a moment of recklessness and courage, they travel to London to join a demonstration in front of the Libyan embassy. When government officials open fire on protesters in broad daylight, both friends are wounded and their lives are forever changed. Interesting. Another chunky one. Then we have Headshot by Rita Bullwinkle. This is published by Daunt Books. Daunt have been publishing some really good things recently. I have enjoyed the work that they've been publishing by Eliza Stewart-Dussepin, by Amina Kane, and I really like their essay collections that they do as well, like At the Pond and In the Kitchen, In the Garden. I just think that, you know, they're doing good stuff. So this is really cool, but it seems so far this is the only indie press that has been longlisted. We still have 2 more books to get to, so maybe there will be more. This one is about, as you can see, a boxer, and I do like books, as Ariel would call it on the Books Unbound podcast, books that are sport books but also not sport books, like Western Lane by Chetna Maru, which is kind of about squash but also really is not about squash, it's just about grief, and On Trampolining by Rebecca Perry, which is, yes, about trampolining but is really about growing up and girlhood and also folklore and the stories that we tell ourselves. So it says, Headshot is the story of the 8 best teenage girl boxers in the United States, told over the course of 2 days of a championship tournament and structured as a series of face-offs. that sounds really interesting. We're nearly there. 2 left. Oh, okay. We have got Stoneyard Devotional by Charlotte Wood. I read her book, what was it called? The Natural Way of Things. Whenever that came out. I don't know if it will say in here when that came out. I am guessing 2016 because it won lots of awards which are listed in the front. So 2015 or 2016. And I did not enjoy that book. And I felt like I was left out of the club because everyone else seemed to love that book so much. She's an Australian writer. This one I believe is about cult. Oh, actually, I don't know. It says, burnt out and in need of a retreat, a middle-aged woman leaves Sydney to return to the place she grew up, taking refuge in a small religious community hidden away on the stark plains of the Australian outback. She doesn't believe in God or know what prayer is and finds herself living this strange, reclusive existence almost by accident. But disquiet interrupts this secluded life with 3 visitations. A mouse plague, lovely. The return of the skeletal remains of a sister, and finally a troubling visitor who plunges the narrator further back into her past. Alright, I will give her writing another go. If this last book is not James by Percival Everett, I will be so surprised. Let me reach in. Yes, okay, it is James by Percival Everett. Okay, I was doubting myself there for a second, and everybody else, because everybody has been saying such great things about this book. So this is about the character who's referred to as Jim in Huck Finn. So retelling of Huck Finn from his perspective, called James. Now, I have not read Huckleberry Finn, which may surprise you, but I think it's such a staple in US literature, but it's not a book that is read hugely over here in the UK. I think same with Anne of Green Gables. Obviously that is massive Canadian classic, and in the UK not so much. I think more recently people have been visiting it because of adaptations and stuff like that, but it's not our canon in the same way that, say, Alice in Wonderland is or anything like that. Anyway, so I have not read Huck Finn, and like with the Tommy Orange book, I will not be reading Huck Finn because I would like to read this and see what it has to say itself. That may mean that I miss quite a few intertextual references, which is a shame because we all know that I love a good bit of intertextuality, but it's a prize list, so that's how I'm going to approach it. That's the rule that I have made for myself. Right, so those are the 13 books. They are scattered in front of me. Immediate thoughts. Some historical fiction I'm not hugely excited about, but we will see. Some really quite chunky books in here, unless the text is quite huge, which may be the case actually with some of them. Some I am excited about. I think the ones I'm most excited about are the Sarah Perry. I am intrigued by Orbital. The Colin Barrett. I think the Safekeep I am quite intrigued by. Headshot as well. And I'm actually quite excited to give Richard Powers another go. See if I can hop on that excitement train with other people, because it's nice to feel that warm buzz when it's going on. It's not a hugely diverse list looking at it, which is a shame, but those are just the immediate thoughts that I have. I will be reading some of these in physical form, others I will be reading via audio, because that is how I'm reading most of my books these days, with nighttime feeds, etc. I'm going to be slotting in reading as and when. It's going to be very chaotic. I will try to make this video less chaotic than my life actually is. And I will start with, I think, the Sarah Perry on audio and Orbital by Samantha Harvey in physical form. And I will come back to you when I have stuff to say. Sorry, I'm aware I keep looking away. I'm just looking at this pile of books. Intriguing. Okay, I will be back soon. Hello, it is a week later and I'm here to update you on 3 books. The first one is Enlightenment by Sarah Perry. This is about a man called Thomas Hart, who is a journalist. He's a queer man living in a rural town in Essex, kind of living a double life. He likes to go into London and he will meet up with men, and then when he comes back to his hometown, he very much keeps to himself and his job and goes to the church that he cares about so much. It's also about his friendship with a young woman called Grace, and they both go to the local church together. This book very much feels like historical fiction. I mean, it is because it's set in the 90s, but it feels like Victorian fiction. I kept on having to remind myself it is not set in Victorian times. That's definitely a deliberate stylistic choice, and I found that quite intriguing. I think it lends itself to the discussion surrounding religion and queerness, which can sometimes feel rather archaic. And I like that juxtaposition of this feels like haunted Victorian ghost story, then we're suddenly talking about emails. I thought that was kind of fun. There was a sentence that I really loved. I love loads of the sentences, but one of them was, the 20th century was wearing itself out on the pavement down below. Lovely. The writing is gorgeous. It is brilliantly narrated by Alex Jennings, I think his name is, who is the man who plays Edward in The Crown. And he's been in lots of other things as well. So I thought it was brilliantly narrated. I thought I was going to love this book. You know, when you get into bed and it's cold outside, the autumn, winter months, I'm going to sound like a reading meme, but you get into bed and it's cold and you kind of do a happy like shimmy down under the duvet and you're like, oh, this is nice, I'm so cozy. When I started listening to this book, that is how I felt about it. I thought, this is my catnip. I love this. This is brilliant. And it is brilliant in so many ways. But whilst I initially thought, this is giving me Sarah Waters, this is giving me The Crimson Petal and the White, I ended up DNFing this book. The writing on a sentence-based level is wonderful, but thematically I found the book quite heavy-handed and also quite uneven plot-wise as well. So it is about friendship, it is about relationships, it's about astronomy, it's also a ghost story, and it felt as though all of the themes that this book had in it were being filtered into three very specific categories: the natural, the unnatural, and the supernatural. And that was not done in any kind of subtle way. And it meant to me that the characters ended up feeling secondary to the themes and sometimes the plot too. And that held me at a remove. And also some of the writing would captivate me and then I would be bored for a section. And what I like to do if I'm feeling that way about a book, not very certain of it, is to look at reviews from other people. And if the negative reviews are saying the reasons they didn't enjoy it are the reasons that I feel earlier on in the book, then I'm quite happy to say, okay, well, I'd like to save myself some time and respect the book enough, I think, to leave it as it is and know that it's for other people who are going to love it. So I looked at reviews and that was exactly the case. So I think this one is sadly not for me. Next, I decided to read Orbital by Samantha Harvey. This is also kind of a book about faith. It's about observing. 6 astronauts are orbiting the Earth. This book is split into sections, each one being an orbit of the Earth. And they're in this timeless space looking down on Earth, thinking about the people that they love who are down there, knowing that they are traveling faster than them and feeling this disconnect. The whole thing makes you feel a little bit dizzy because it does feel like you're circling something always. There's one part where one of the characters is thinking about an art lesson where the art teacher showed them a painting, and in the painting someone was being painted, and the question was, who is the subject of this painting? Is it the painter, the artist that you can't see, who is painting the people within the painting? Is it the artist who did the actual painting? Is it the servants who are in the background of the painting? Is it you as the viewer? There's just lots of different discussions of perspective. The characters end up clinging to philosophy and things that aren't very tangible because they have been completely separated from tangible things. Like nothing really feels real to them at this point. In fact, reality itself is just something that they're questioning. The whole novel feels as though it lacks gravity. And these characters have created their own world for themselves, their own reality within this spacecraft. They've even started making up a folklore for themselves, which is one of the markers of a society that is establishing itself. I would say if you've read Alan Lightman's work or David Eagleman's work, then you will enjoy this book. Let me read you, maybe I'll just read you the very beginning so you can see what the writing style is like, because I think that's the real hero of this book. Rotating about the Earth in their spacecraft, they are so together and so alone that even their thoughts, their internal mythologies at times convene. Sometimes they dream the same dreams of fractals and blue spheres and familiar faces engulfed in dark, and of the bright, energetic black of space that slams their senses. Raw space is a panther. Feral and primal, they dream it stalking through their quarters. They hang in their sleeping bags, a handspan away. Beyond a skin of metal, the universe unfolds in simple eternities. It is lovely. It does feel a bit much, that writing. Even though the book is only 130 something pages, it did get a little bit much for me at times, in the same way that Soldier Sailor by Claire Kilroy sometimes felt a bit much, though I adored that book as well. I would say I love that book much more than Orbital, but if you like the writing style of Soldier Sailor, then you will also really enjoy Orbital too. The book that I have just started reading, I have taken the dust jacket off, is The Safekeep by L. van der Watten. This is the book about siblings, where the sister in this group of siblings is asked to house her brother's girlfriend for a month, and she's really not happy about it. It's set 15 years after the Second World War. So far, I'm really enjoying it. There's a lot of really snarky dialogue that's making me giggle quite a bit. So I will talk to you about that more once I'm more of the way in, because I'm only 34 pages right now. So far we've got not the best start, but also not the worst start. Let's see where we get to next. Hi folks, it's been a while. I don't mind telling you that I'm getting my butt kicked by sleep progression at the moment, and if you don't know what sleep progression is, then I'm very happy for you. I have made my way through 5 more books. I just haven't had the time, the space, or the mental bandwidth to sit down and talk to you about them, and the pile is going to keep on growing, and I'm worried that the thoughts I have are just going to seep out of my brain and disappear. So I don't think I have time to talk about all 5 of them today, but I want to make a start on catching up with you. So I'm going to talk about 2 of them. So out of the 5, I DNF'd 2 quite early on for very different reasons. I DNF'd 1 about halfway through. Again, we'll talk about why when I talk about that book. And then I finished 2 in full, 1 in audiobook form, 1 in physical form. And I think I may backtrack later, but I think I may have found the winner of this year's prize. It won't be my favourite book from this year's list, but my favourite and the book I think that's going to win. They're often 2 different books when it comes to reading long lists. I mean, I still have several books to read, and maybe I will change my mind, but that's how I'm feeling about it at the moment. Let me talk to you about 2 books in this segment, because I think I'm going to have to disappear after that, and then I'll come back tomorrow. Let's talk about the 2 that I DNF'd early on. The first one is Held by Anne Michaels. It's about a character called John set in the First World War. He's been injured, he goes back home to Yorkshire, and it also spans several generations. It's told in a very fragmented way. It's only about 200 pages. It wouldn't have taken me a huge amount of time to finish this book, which should indicate my level of enjoyment if I decided to part ways with it early on. I really love fragmented writing, poetic writing. I love poetry, you know that. So that stylistic choice is not why I didn't enjoy this book. But having said that, I think maybe the decision to make it so fragmented did hamper my enjoyment, because I didn't feel as though that stylistic choice quite fit what the book itself was saying. Thematically it makes sense, because the main character's going in and out of consciousness to begin with, and then we've got this paragraph early on. When John remembered his father, he seemed only able to recall fragments, deep feeling, but only pieces, moments together, not even days, years, an entire life, now only this handful, this heartful. So I can understand the choice, but if you're not enjoying the writing style itself, and it's told in fragments, for me personally, I can end up feeling as though the author has chosen that format in order to make the text feel more profound. And if you're not feeling that profoundness, then it ends up feeling quite empty. I felt, like saying yes and, if there was a sentence that was an entire paragraph isolated on its own, and I just didn't feel as though it needed to stand on its own like that. It needed lots of things propping it up either side. So yeah, this wasn't one for me. Obviously other people are going to love it, and I would love to know your thoughts if you have read it. The other one was Wild Houses by Colin Barrett. This one I was really, I wasn't enjoying it, otherwise I would have finished it. I was appreciating it. Sometimes you can read a book and think this is very, very good, but it's just not my cup of tea. That's what this one is here. It's not a book I would have picked up outside of this prize. It's a novel about rival drug dealers, and that's just not something that I gravitate towards. I would say It's a bit like Irish Fargo. I think that would be my tagline for it, Irish Fargo. It's the kind of thing I would rather watch than read. You know how sometimes we enjoy consuming different things in different mediums. It's about a character called Dev who opens his door one day and there are two men there who have kidnapped the teenage son of a man who owes them money, and they want to hide him in Dev's house. It's very farcical in places and also tender in others. We get to a pinnacle point and then the story will jump back in time so that the reader can get caught up and see how the characters arrived at that particular moment. And I thought that was a very effective stylistic choice. So yes, I think there's lots to recommend this book, and I would recommend it for fans of Glorious Heresies by Lisa McInerney, which won the Women's Prize back in 2016. I also was listening to the audiobook of this. It is brilliantly narrated, so check out that if it sounds like it is your cup of tea. I'm going to cut off here and I will catch up more with you tomorrow. Hello, it's not the next day. It's not the day after that either. It's several days in the future. Let me talk to you about the next 3 books. So we have Headshot by Rita Bullwinkle. This one I DNF'd, I would say half to 2/3 of the way through. This follows 8 teenage girls who are fighting in a national boxing competition, and it's split into sections, and each section is one of those matches. So a face-off between 2 of the girls, and we hear about their lives as they're fighting in the ring. I think it's a really interesting premise, but what I actually found as I was reading it is that it became a little tired structure-wise. It really felt like you were going through the rounds with them and not always in the best way. I thought that the first section was the strongest personally, and I thought that would have made an amazing short story standing on its own 2 feet, perfect just as it is. What did I like about this? I liked how cutting the narrator of this book is, because the narrator is describing the fights between these girls. These fights these girls are so invested in. It's the centre of their universe, and they've worked so hard to be at this national competition, and the narrator is just mocking them slightly by dipping into their future lives and telling you, the reader, what they're going to be when they grow up. So, you know, most of them are thinking, I'm going to be really successful at this, I'm going to be a boxer. And then the narrator says, oh, well, they're going to work in, you know, a wine shop, or they're going to be an office worker. And it really undermines the investment that these girls have in their present moment. And that's a really unsettling feeling for the reader to have. And I thought that was brilliant. It's almost like the narrator is fighting the girls themselves, jabbing at them every so often. Oh, you won't be able to hold a cup of tea by the time you're 60. Oh, by the way, you're going to fail your exams. You know, it really feels like this is the fight the girls are fighting in this moment, but this is the fight that they're fighting throughout the course of their lives, and most of them are going to lose. One paragraph says, you can't train for a sport unless you believe you have control over your own destiny. The point of training is to change the outcome of the future. You train to change something you otherwise would have lost. But of course they can't change it, because this narrator is writing about their lives knowing what's already going to happen to them, so they're stuck. They are not amorphous, ever-changing bodies reaching out from girlhood into adulthood. They are static narratives. It really is quite biting. And there it was, Artemis's glove right between Andy Taylor's eyeballs, Andy's nose bleeding, Andy's nose feeling like cornflakes. I mean, that's a really good description. As they sit on their stools, legs spread and red-faced, Artemis's and Andy's minds spin like wind turbines. The inside of both of their heads feels like rushing water. Their processing functions are working in overdrive. Sensory input has been delayed. Verbs are the only things that they can clearly hear. We get these snapshots of memories that they have as well about why they are fighting. And some of these memories are extremely traumatic. So to have them flash up sometimes in the middle of these fights, I think is also something that works very well. Again, feeding into that jabbing imagery. I also really like how I would say 90% of the time the girls are referred to by their full names. So we've got Andy Taylor, for instance, and Artemis Victor. And that really reminds me of nostalgic feelings towards school friends who you perhaps don't see anymore. We always remember schoolmates by their full names because that's what they were on the school register, or some university people perhaps because of Facebook will remember their full names too. And I think that also helps to highlight how these characters already have this past tense feeling about them, even though they're fighting for their now. So as a book of literary contradictions, I think it's great, but I just didn't love it as an extended novel, which is a shame. Next, I read The Safekeep by Yael van Duiden, and I finished this one. I really, really enjoyed it. This one is my favourite from the long list that I have read so far. It's got two things about it that I particularly love in books. It's got some great dinner scenes. We open with a dinner scene with siblings. We've got two brothers and a sister, and one of the brothers is late and he's bringing his new girlfriend with him, and apparently he always brings a new girlfriend with him, and the other siblings are sick of having to make an effort to try and get to know these women when they know they're probably never going to see them again. And there's a lot of really snarky remarks between these siblings. I just thought it was so great. And the other thing that is like catnip to me with this book is that it reminded me quite a lot of Notes on a Scandal by Zoe Heller. You will know if you've been here a while, I'm always looking for books that have that particular feeling. It really is a feeling as opposed to a plot point about this. It is dark and it is queer, and there's quite a lot of secrecy and obsession. So that is why I say it feels quite similar to Notes on a Scandal. So if you've also been looking for a book like that, I present this one to you. I should say that primarily we're following Isabel, who is the sister in this group of siblings. She has two brothers and she lives in their family home on her own, looking after the house. And her brother, who often has these new girlfriends, comes to this family dinner and he says, this is my new girlfriend, this is Eva, and I really need her to come stay at the family home while I go on a work trip. Isabel is extremely annoyed about this, and you think as you're reading it that you understand why she hates this new woman, and then there's always a separate reason for why she hates her that takes you longer to figure out, and I really enjoyed that. And there are so many very funny exchanges between them. Eva came to a standstill. She breathed a few quick times, chest rising. Why are you so determined to dislike me? There's no determination there. I dislike you quite effortlessly. I did laugh quite a lot at that bit. I would say it's very clear from the beginning with Isabel and Eva that they actually quite like each other, and there's lots of sexual tension there. And I did think, oh, for goodness sake, just, you know, let's get things moving here. I enjoyed the chase of these two characters, and that I don't know if it's deliberate, but I feel there's quite a few references to Call Me By Your Name in this. Tongue-in-cheek, I would say. Like the peach in Call Me By Your Name, there is a pear in this. The pear is not put through quite so much as the peach is in Call Me By Your Name, but yes, I don't know if that's deliberate or not, but it definitely brought Call Me By Your Name to mind. I think one of the things that this book is asking is, what do queer people inherit if they are not part of like a heteronormative structure? How can things be passed on? How can queer narratives be passed on too? Like, how can those survive? I think that is one element of what's being discussed here, and using the inheritance of the family home to discuss that, because both Isabel and her brother Hendrik are queer and their other brother is straight, so he is set to inherit the most because he happens to be straight. So I think that's one of the discussions that's happening in this narrative, but there is a bigger conversation that is happening there too, and I don't want to say anything about that because that is quite spoilery. Well, it's very spoilery, and one of the many fantastic things about this book. So I'm hesitant to say more about it. I will read you a sentence that I have underlined because I've underlined many. There was one here which I thought was a really good description of Eva. Eva took up space with a loud restlessness. A bee stuck in a room with all the windows shut. I feel like you can really feel that as you're reading it, which is always lovely. Deeply unsettling in places, very sexy in others, very layered, and just overall just very well written. I thought that the dialogue was excellent. I thought the reveals were well paced as well. In parts it also reminded me of Claire Fuller's Bitter Orange as well, so if that's a book you've enjoyed, I would also recommend this. And then the last book I have read, so now we're up to date and I can continue with my reading. We've got My Friends by Hisham Attar, and this is the one that I would say at the moment I would put money on if I was betting on what book was going to win this year's Booker Prize. I listened to this one on audiobook. It's actually narrated by Hisham Attar himself, which was a lovely thing. Though I will say, side note for anybody who needs big font like me, the text in this book is actually huge, which I also love. In this book, we're following 3 friends: Khaled, who is our main character, and then we're also following Mustafa and Hossam. Hossam is a writer. Mustafa is a person that Khaled gets to know at university in Edinburgh. And Khaled is our central person, but at one point Mustafa and Hossam hang out without him. And I think that because we spend so much time with Khaled, you get to experience that feeling of being left out when Khaled discovers that they're, you know, together and he is not there. You feel that loss with him. Khaled and Mustafa go to Edinburgh University, as I said. They are students who have gone to Edinburgh from Libya, and they decide to travel down to London for a demonstration outside the Libyan embassy, outspoken against Gaddafi. And this was a demonstration that did take place, and there is a shooting at this demonstration, which is also something that happened in real life. There are real life events that are peppered throughout this book, and I think a sign of that really working is that I had to check which ones were real and which ones were fiction, because they are blended quite seamlessly. When I was listening to this, I emailed myself fragmented thoughts. So let's see what this email thread is that I sent to myself. Yeah, so I also just wrote down quotes that I really liked. It appeared he was not only sitting to one side of his suitcase, but also one side of his heart. We start the book at the end of their story, then we look back on their decades of friendship. And the ending is a parting, as Khaled is watching his friends leave him to go and live their lives elsewhere. So it has that finality to it. You feel like the characters can't escape the things that they are travelling towards. I suppose in the same way that Headshot is framed, but that's reassuring, I think, in the My Friends narrative, whereas in Headshot it's used to unsettle you. When we're first introduced to Mustafa, when Khaled first sees him, he says he's looking as lavishly bored as an abandoned building. Really liked that description. Before the shooting at the Libyan embassy, Khaled said, "I was a house who had been left wide open." I love imagery to do with houses and bodies. You know that if you've been here a while. A lot of this book is about how writing itself can be an act of protest and what literature can do to aid in protest. I haven't read Hisham Attar before, but I know he's written a non-fiction book about the abduction of his father. So these central themes of protest, of writing, of the importance of how we frame narratives and what's recorded and remembered are really heavy throughout his work. And I would say that My Friends has similar themes to Enter Ghost by Isabel Hamad, if you read that. I was also really strongly reminded of Brotherless Night by Vivi Ganashanathan, which won the Women's Prize this year, kind of looking at how we record history when we don't know that what we're living through is something that will become history. That's something that the narrator of Brotherless Night is trying to discuss, because lots of people ask her to relive parts of her childhood and kind of look at cause and effect. But she says it's so hard to separate that when you didn't notice all the tiny things that escalated into something huge, because it was just your everyday life. I did feel that I enjoyed the first maybe 2/3 more than the final third. There were a few too many coincidences, I think, in the last third, where some characters were very centrally involved in big dramatic events, which didn't always feel true to me. I'm aware that when big dramatic things happen and involve people will have had to have been there. But the fact that those people happen to be the main characters of this novel just felt a little bit too, I don't know, maybe a little bit too on the nose. And I was drawn out of the book in those particular moments. But I think this will win because it's very, very good, but also because it is a book about the importance of literature and the importance of books and the importance of writing. And I think, like when, you know, films about films do well at the Oscars, I think books about books do quite well in book prizes, because obviously as book lovers we happen to love them. There's a lot about books as code, because after this terrible event at the Libyan embassy, Khaled is not able to go home to visit his family, and he can talk to them on the phone, but he knows that people are listening. So they have to speak in code. They have to dance around what they really want to say to each other. And that's also reflected in moments where some of the characters embark on translating literature. So Khaled said, "The sentences began to resemble little rooms, good places in which to vanish." Thought that was very beautiful. And then looking at bodies of text as well, like literal bodies as text, bodies as things to be interpreted, as having things written on them in the form of scars and memories. I think it's a very accomplished book. So now we are all caught up on my reading. I am going to start reading I don't know where I'm going to go to next, maybe the Richard Powers. I have to say I have a little bit of a conundrum. The Richard Powers, the Rachel Kushner and the Claire Massoud, those are all books with tiny, tiny font. Now the Richard Powers and the Rachel Kushner, that may just be the proofs because they're not out until September. I've been sent proof copies and it might be that the finished versions have large fonts, but the proofs have tiny, tiny text. The Claire Massoud is a finished one because it's out. It also has tiny text. Because the Rachel Kushner and the Richard Powers are not out yet, they're not available on audio, so I can't turn to those on audio. And the audiobook for the Claire Massoud, I mean, I listened to the sample and I thought it was quite terrible. So not the text itself, but the narration of the audiobook. So I don't feel drawn towards the audiobook of that. If you're new, I have very scratched corn ears, so I find it very difficult to read tiny text. So I'm going to give these big ones with the small font a go, as I'm doing with all of the books on here, but I think I'm going to have to be even more strict as to whether or not it's worth my, physical effort persevering with these books if I'm not really, really enjoying them. So let me maybe try those ones next and then I can let you know my thoughts. Yes, that's all. I will see you very soon. Hi everyone. After a series of unfortunate events, I'm now filming this segment, which I think is the last segment if I have enough time to sit down and talk about everything that I need to talk about. I'm filming this all in one go. I had hoped to check in with you at various points, but my computer broke and I couldn't import footage to edit and I didn't really want to record if I couldn't safely put it somewhere. So we're just coming to have a big chat right at the end here. And whilst my computer has not yet been repaired, I think it's well enough to edit the end of this video, but probably not up to heavy editing. So I'm also going to just be perhaps a little rambly in this section, not too edited, just for the sake of getting all this video together and getting up and out to you, because I would like this video to survive and I'm worried that if I don't finish it now, it will die a death. So let's chat about everything. I realized I also said at the beginning of this video that I wanted to talk to you about my experience of prizes and share a few anecdotes with you, and I can do that, but I was thinking about which ones I would like to share, and probably the juiciest ones are things I just can't share because they're, from judging processes. It's like the awful time when I was on a jury for 6 months on a murder trial, which was not a fun time. And yes, anyway, let's not talk about that. Judging prizes has never been like being on a murder trial, just to contextualize that, but I just mean, it's a similar thing. You're not allowed to talk about lots of things. So I can't talk about the ins and outs of judging a prize. I can't believe I just compared that to a murder trial. Moving on. I can't talk about the ins and outs of judging a prize, aside from saying that, generally speaking, I've had a really fun time with it, and sometimes it's very tense and stressful because you want to make sure that you're making the right decision. There's a lot of reading to do. I think a question I get asked quite a lot when it comes to prizes is, do you have to read everything that is submitted? And I would say for 95% of the prizes that I have judged, I have read everything that has been submitted from publishers. There are different eligibility rules. Sometimes publishers are allowed to submit a certain number of titles from an imprint, and sometimes there is no limit. But for the most part, I only like to work with prizes where I do get to read everything. I don't love judging prizes where I'm, say, reading a really small selection of books, say the top 10 books, after someone else has filtered through the rest, because I don't really feel like I'm actually making the decision that I've been hired to do. So I tend to turn those down. Major big prizes don't work like that, but some smaller ones do. I think the most reading book-wise I've ever done for a prize was when I judged the Forward Prize for poetry back in, was that 2018? There were hundreds and hundreds of poetry books. Page count-wise, maybe it was a smaller number than some of the other prizes I've judged, but reading from a huge number of voices, that was the biggest selection that I had to read from. anecdotes. My first experience of a prize, I think, is definitely as a writer. I am a writer, I think I said that at the beginning. I'm a published author. I've written, I think, 14 books at this point, some of which aren't out yet, but we will talk about that in the not too distant future. And I've always written since I was tiny and have submitted to local competitions and then national competitions. And my interest in prizes, I think, stems from that as opposed to a reader. I don't remember going into bookshops as a child and looking for things that had won. Would it have been the Whitbread Award back then? I can't remember. But I don't remember that being of interest to me. Definitely more of interest as a reader as an adult, but not as a child, which I don't think is surprising. So my interest in prizes, I think, stemmed from being a writer and also actually working as a bookseller, which I did when I was at university. And I won a prize in, I can't remember the year, but it was about 15, 16 years ago. I won a prize that was linked to the Women's Prize for Fiction. It wasn't the Women's Prize for Fiction. I did not win that 16 years ago, but they were running competitions alongside their main prize, and I won one of those. And I was invited to the Women's Prize ceremony. Back then it was called the Orange Prize, and I had never been to an awards ceremony before. I guess I was working in the publishing industry then because I was a bookseller, but I wasn't working in the, I would say, inside the machine. I was working outside of the machine externally as a bookseller. I'd never been to an industry event before, and it was a weird experience. It was a nice experience, but I think very jarring for me. I can only liken it to my time being interviewed at Cambridge University. When I applied for universities as an A-level student, I applied to Cambridge and I got an interview. I did not get in. I had the grades to get in, but I flunked that interview because I was so nervous. I was given no prep for it at all, and I just didn't know what to expect. And as a girl from Sunderland who went to state school and then to college, and college, I know that's kind of confusing because in the States that's university. Here it's a sixth form, but it's more informal than that. So I'd gone to college to do A-levels, had applied to Cambridge University, got an interview, and I thought you had to really dress up for these interviews. So I got a new outfit, and it was, I can't remember what it was, but it involved a suit jacket kind of. And I went to this interview and realised when I got there that I was very overdressed, and that if you went to private school, you were aware that you didn't have to dress up and be really formal. So I felt very awkward in my very formal gear, and everybody else there basically was in jeans and a t-shirt. And I think that's very common when it comes to situations like that, being out of your depth in a class sense, I guess. So I felt a bit like that when I went to the Women's Prize for Fiction, which is no slight on the Women's Prize at all. It's just I had never been to an industry event like that, and the publishing industry is quite upper middle class, and I went completely overdressed. So I went with Mr. M, is what I'm saying. I went with my now husband. He was not my husband back then, my partner. And we were basically dressed in black tie. And we went to this party thinking everybody else would be dressed in black tie. We looked like we were going to prom, and no one else looked like they were going to prom. Everyone looked very nice. Everyone was wearing, nice summer dresses and all of that. But I felt like I stuck out like a sore thumb. I felt very overdressed, very self-conscious. Everybody there was really lovely, but we just didn't know anybody. The publishing industry can be quite insular as well, so everyone was catching up with everyone else. We knew not a single soul. So what we did in that party is we decided to go hunting for canapes. That's what we did. The canapes were amazing. Let me tell you, they were serving roast dinners in small jars, and they would bring them out every so often, and we would go on a hunt to find them and then meet up with each other and just eat them. That was what we did at that party. I hope the Women's Prize is okay with that. That's what we spent our time doing on that evening. Anyway, that was my first experience of going to the Women's Prize 16 years ago. I have since been back as, a book reviewer, as an author, as someone who now works in the publishing industry, but I never want to forget how I felt when I went there the first time, which, as I said, is no slight on the prize at all. It's just how the publishing industry is. And I think it's important to remember how that can feel as someone looking in from the outside. It can be a little bit intimidating. I'm sure that's the case for a lot of industries. And I'm also speaking from the point of view of someone who is just quite an anxious person. So possibly it was mostly just me. Anyway, since that time, forever ago, I have worked with prizes as a book reviewer, as an author, as someone who just works in the industry more generally. And anecdote-wise, let me see what else I can share. In 2016, this makes me laugh. In 2016, I worked for the Book Awards and had a lovely time. They no longer exist and it makes me sad. I judged the poetry category, and before the prize giving ceremony, the awards people said camera crews to the judges' houses. That makes it sound like the X Factor. They went to the judges' houses so that we could talk about the books that we had shortlisted and why we loved them so much. And then they were going to play those videos at the prize ceremony before announcing who had won. So a film crew came to my house and I sat there and talked about all the books. And I did think the camera guy wasn't really focusing the camera on my face. And I thought, well, that's ridiculous. Obviously, he must be focusing the camera on my face, because why would he not be doing that? Don't be silly, Jen. So I didn't question it. And then at the prize ceremony, when they played the videos, they had the other two judges talking about the books that they loved, and then they had me talking about the books that I loved, but they hadn't been filming my face. They'd been filming Lola, who is Mr. M's mum's dog, who we look after quite a bit, and she had been sitting next to me on the bench that I was sitting on. So they had filmed me talking or recorded me talking, but had been filming her instead. So the whole video was just Lola and then my voice in the background. And I don't blame them at all, because she is a very cute dog, and it did make me laugh a lot. It amused me greatly. So that is one anecdote. And I can't really give you tea, I suppose, from book prizes. But I will say that at one book prize ceremony that I went to that I was not a judge for, one of the judges came up to me quite drunk and told me that one of the worst books they had ever read was on the shortlist that year, and they were very salty about it. And yes, I do know what book that was, and they definitely shouldn't have told me, and it was very unprofessional. But I was amused. So yes, things can go down in judging rooms. I have definitely had spats with judges before. Things can sometimes feel a little bit personal, as it can with books, because they are so personal to us. And I have got cross on occasion, very rarely, when I felt that people have maybe brought their own prejudices to the judging room and have not evaluated those and had some self-reflection, and I have found myself getting a bit heated and had to really fight my corner for the things that I have felt really passionate about. So judging can be a wonderful thing. It can also be quite a frustrating thing. Prizes are fun. They can really change an author's life, and I kind of jump between feeling that they are amazing and then also feeling like I need to dial it back and chill out a bit, because not everybody cares about them as much as the people who work in the publishing industry do. But I think that is also very telling of the publishing industry. We are very inward looking. We care deeply about our own projects and expect the rest of the world to care about them too. Sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. Anyway, that's my little ramble about book prizes. There are many more things I could share, but I would get told off. So I will stop before I start divulging things that I should not divulge. And let us talk about the rest of this list, because I have thoughts and not all of them are happy. Firstly, briefly, and you may be able to hear my daughter very happily screaming at some trees in the garden. She's definitely my daughter because she's excited about the leaves changing colours. Autumn is approaching and I'm very, very excited about it. So very briefly, I said there were the 3 books with tiny text that I was going to give a go because as part of my disability, I have very scratched corneas. It's very difficult for me to read small text. And I would see if I thought it was worth my effort ploughing through these. Essentially, I have decided it is not, but let me contextualize that a bit. So I started reading Playground by Richard Powers. As I mentioned, I think at the beginning, I tried to read the overstory before and didn't get on with it. I don't know if it's the earnestness of Richard's writing. I can see why people really, really love it. I think it's very epic epic and very intense, and all of those things can be good things, but when it comes to how I feel about them, we just don't tend to get on. With this book, I think that it is very beautifully written in places, but I don't think it's going to be a book that I'm going to really, really love. And with my limited time at the moment, I just don't think it is worth me ploughing through this to talk to you about it if I'm not going to really love it. You don't need me to do that. If you would like to find in-depth thoughts from other people, please go ahead and do that. I will say that I felt a little bit with this book, the way that I did about Paul Harding's book last year, This Other Eden, in the way that as a white author, when he writes about like race sometimes, I find it a little bit, I just found myself wincing a bit. And I think it's all very well intentioned, but it didn't feel that great all the time. So yeah, I had complicated feelings about that. Yes. Then I picked up Creation Lake by Rachel Kushner. This one I just think maybe I would like. For some reason it was reminding me a little bit of Paul Murray. I don't know why I'm just equating books with books that were on the list last year. Definitely amusing in places, but I again don't think that this is a book I'm going to absolutely adore, so I decided not to continue with it. I realise I'm not giving synopses for these books. I'm sure that you've heard lots of people talk about them, and if not, you can also go and find other reviews if you would like to know more. And then the Claire Masood, which is the one that is already out. There is an audiobook of this. I did think about looking up the ebooks for the other two where I could enlarge the font, but they're not out yet, so that's not an option. And with this one, it is out, but if I wanted to get the ebook from the library, it's not available until Christmas, and I would like this video to get out before Christmas. And also, as I said, I don't think I'm going to love this one anyway. This is historical fiction, kind of remind me a little bit of Life After Life by Kate Atkinson. The premise is entirely different, but the way it is written, this epic family saga, it definitely put me in mind of that. And I will say with the Richard Powers, I was reminded a little of Leonie Ross's This One Sky Day, and also Ruth Ozeki's writing. Ruth Ozeki's writing Tale for the Time Being and The Book of Form and Emptiness in particular. Again, plot-wise, they're quite different, but writing style, that's what I was reminded of. So if those books are ones that you love, maybe you will enjoy Playground. So yes, those ones were ones I decided not to continue with. I then actually listened to James by Percival Everett, which is the retelling of Huckleberry Finn, but told from the point of view of the character James, who is called Jim in Huck Finn. As I said, I haven't read Huck Finn and I haven't read Tom Sawyer. And I feel slightly conflicted when it comes to sequels. This is not a sequel, but sequels appearing in prize lists, and also retellings if they rely heavily on the original text. There's nothing wrong with the book doing that at all. I love intertextuality. I love a book that is taking something that's canon and doing something new with it. Like, I just really, really enjoy that. But in the context of a prize, when a book has to represent itself, stand on its own 2 feet and not rely on any of those things, I do feel conflicted. And when I was reading this, I was loving all the discussion on language, and how James was saying that everything he says as an enslaved person, he filters to make himself sound the way that white people want him to sound less intelligent than he is, because it makes them feel more comfortable and therefore it makes him more safe. I really loved all the discussion on that. I think what I couldn't work out, because I haven't read Huckleberry Finn, is how much of this was in the original text plot-wise, and I think a lot of plot is in the original, and I therefore couldn't analyse it in the way that I would like to outside of reading a prize list. So this is one I might potentially revisit in the future outside of the book prize, read Huckleberry Finn, then read this, and then I can have a really good conversation with myself about those two books. But in the context of a prize, I don't know. I felt like, I'm falling over my words. Essentially, I felt like I was missing out on something when I was reading this. And when it comes to prize books, that's not how I want to feel. And then it's the same for this, which is Wandering Stars by Tommy Orange, which I didn't realise. I knew it linked in with his book There in some way, but I wasn't sure how. So essentially the first half of this book is set before his book There, and the second half is set after There. And again, when I was reading this book, I thought it was very beautifully written, but I felt like I was missing out on something. I felt this is very much a companion piece to something I haven't read, and prize context wise, that's not how I want to feel about a book. If I'm looking at which ones do I think will make a shortlist, which ones would I personally choose, not that my opinion matters very much, but which one would I personally choose as a winner, I felt like I had to discount this book for that reason, but I wouldn't discount it outside of prize discussion. Again, it's one that I would revisit and read There, and then, you know, have a lovely time with both of those books. But I decided not to pursue it in the context of this video. Then I read Stoneyard Devotional, which is the last book, I think if I have counted correctly, that I need to talk to you about. And friends, I love this book. Hallelujah. We're ending on a positive note. I adored this book, and also it was a relief because I haven't loved her work in the past, but it's been such a long time. Maybe I need to revisit her previous titles. Maybe I should just let those rest. I don't know. I loved this book so much. I'm trying to work out, because I haven't decided, if it's my favourite from this list. Quite possibly it is. This is a very quiet book. I think I said at the beginning that it was about a cult. It's not about a cult. It is about a woman who goes to live in a convent. I guess maybe you could consider that like a cult. I don't know. She's living in a small religious community, and this is her diary. And I think that conceit really works. It's difficult to pull off, making a reader believe that a character is writing a diary as opposed to an author writing a book that is pretending to be a diary for you to read, where they will write down convenient things for you to learn about. The writer, the narrator, has to exclude information that's very obvious to them because they wouldn't write about it in their diary, right? And I think enough of that is done in this book. So there are enough things where you're thinking, I don't really know what you're talking about, because we're not supposedly the intended audience of this diary. She's just writing it for herself, so she's not going to do exposition for us. There was enough of that without it being confusing. So enough to be intriguing, not enough to be confusing and frustrating. I thought it was balanced out so well. So she has gone to live in this religious community. You don't really know why. She talks about a husband that she had. She talks about her mother dying. There is not a huge amount of plot in this book. This book is really all about unsettling feelings to do with forgiveness, the passage of time. How do we reconcile things that happened a long time ago? How do we put things to rest? There are lots of metaphors that facilitate this discussion. There is mention of plague. COVID is going on in the background, or at least you assume. I don't know if they ever say it is COVID, but I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be that. People are wearing masks, but I wouldn't really say this is a pandemic novel in case that gives you the ick. Don't worry about that. Just that there are bad things going on in the world, but she is very cut off from that. There is a plague of mice at one point. There is a sister's bones that's being brought back to the convent. She died far away, and that being laid to rest is also part of the discussion of forgiveness and laying things to rest. The mice plague that is going on is, makes me just feel a bit, I want to just do a shudder. That's how it makes me feel. The discussions of mice running everywhere. I don't know if you saw that viral video. It was like decades ago, like 15 years ago maybe, of a mice plague in Australia. I'm sure that there has been plenty of them, given the way that it's discussed in this. This book is set in Australia, but you may remember seeing videos of a farm where mice were just everywhere and crawling on top of people. I will never forget that video, and it was brought to mind when I was reading this book here. The way this book is written reminded me so much of The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. Not in plot, though I suppose it is about a community of women who are living together and then they're not really sharing things, and they do sometimes feel like they're talking a little bit in code and tiptoeing around certain subjects. So I suppose that feels a little bit like The Handmaid's Tale, and it can feel dystopian in places, even though it's the world we live in. Some might argue that is quite dystopian. Anyway, what I'm saying is it gave me the feels of The Handmaid's Tale, but it is not about a post-nuclear world where people are handmaids. It just feels quite sinister. It feels as though the minute details of life that are being discussed are really weighted and heavy in the way that they are in The Handmaid's Tale. And it is very well written, like in The Handmaid's Tale too. Like with that, it's the slow reveal of the world around you. I wouldn't say that there are huge reveals in this book, but you keep on wanting to read because you just want to discover just a little bit more, and also just get this feeling of grossness and I keep using the word unsettling, but it's so unsettling, this unsettling feeling off you, and you feel that if you keep reading it, maybe it will leave you and you will be purged of it. I can't say that happens, but it is really brilliant. Essentially, this book feels like it is decaying and you are decaying with it. And I know that that might not sound like an advertisement for it, but I do intend it to be so. So we should sum up, I suppose. This has not been a hugely successful year for me when it comes to reading these books, as in there were not loads that I fell in love with. I feel like last year I had a more successful time. The year before, maybe it was similar. Sometimes with prizes, I read a list and I love loads of them. Sometimes I might find a couple of gems. I appreciate the time that I'm reading this list means that I had perhaps less patience with some of these books, but I also don't feel like I stopped reading any books that would become absolute favourites. And I definitely have persevered with books in the past, thinking I need to be completionist and all of that, and then have regretted the time that I have spent finishing them. So some of you may disagree with my approach to the prize this year, but this is reality right now. I have to really carefully choose what I'm allocating time and energy towards, and I think that I have discovered some amazing books in this list that I'm so glad to have read and to be able to talk to you about, and others that I haven't gelled with that I am completely okay with saying not for me. We'll pass these on to other people who I think will love them. So out of the 13 books, Creation Lake could be a book that I really like, but the font was too small. I couldn't read it, so I can't really give you my opinion of it. The Claire Masood I don't think was ever going to be for me, neither was Playground by Richard Powers. Wild Houses by Colin Barrett, I have been thinking about this one again because the writing I did really love, but the themes of drug dealers and a feud, and I don't know, it just wasn't what I wanted at this particular time. As I said, it's like a bit like Fargo, and I love watching that, not necessarily reading a book that's like that, but I could revisit this in the future. I could see myself revisiting it. James by Percival Everett and Wandering Stars by Tommy Orange, potentially really brilliant books. I think this will make the shortlist, James by Percival Everett. I do not think that Wandering Stars will make the shortlist. I mean, I don't know why I'm saying that right now, because I'm going to talk about potential shortlisted books in a minute, but for me personally, outside of the context of this prize, potentially could really love them, but reading it in the context of a prize, having not read the books that they're referencing, I felt like I was missing out on something. Stoneyard Devotional by Charlotte Wood, absolutely loved it. Sarah Perry's Enlightenment, wanted to love it, sadly did not. It just fell apart for me plot-wise, a bit too on the nose thematically. Held by Anne Michaels, not a book that I enjoyed at all. We've talked about that already. We don't need to go back to that. So books that I've spoken about nearer to the beginning of this video, we had Headshot by Rita Bullwinkle, and I know that I said that structure-wise it felt a little bit repetitive. I do still find myself thinking about this book, and I'm so glad that I read the majority of it, and I could see myself maybe going back to this at some point. Orbital by Samantha Harvey, really enjoyed. The Safekeep by Yael van der Wooden, really loved this one, and really loved My Friends by Hisham Matar. So my personal shortlist, you may think this is kind of weird, but this is my personal shortlist of books that I enjoyed the most, because James by Percival Everett I was really enjoying, I just think I was missing something. Stoneyard Devotional, My Friends, Orbital and The Safekeep are all books that I really loved, and then Headshot is the one that I keep thinking about and really admire in many ways, just didn't adore overall. I think it's telling that if I'm picking 6 books, 2 of them are books that I have many caveats about when it comes to including them in a shortlist. So I can't even choose 6 that I've absolutely loved from this list. But when it comes to talking about what I think is going to be on the actual shortlist and books that I admire but perhaps weren't to my personal taste, that's different. Actually, I'm saying it's that different. I have just sat down and had a word with myself and thought about what I think could be on the judges' shortlist this year, and it's only one different, and that is the Claire Masood. I would switch out Headshot for the Claire Masood. So my 6 predictions for this year's shortlist are Orbital, The Strange Eventful History, My Friends, The Safekeep, Stoneyard Devotional, and James, and I predict that My Friends by Hisham Attar is going to win. Those are my thoughts on this year's prize. I think that I know that I have rambled a lot in this end section, so I hope that that is okay with you. I feel like you don't mind a bit of unedited rambling, which is always appreciated. I would love to know what books from this year's list you have read or are thinking about reading. Yeah, let's have a chat in the comments section down below. I would love that. I would love that a lot. And I am going to stop talking now and wrap this video up and hope that my computer can edit this. If you have enjoyed this, if you're new to my channel and you're not subscribed already, I would love you to subscribe. And if you do enjoy my content and you would like to consider supporting me on Patreon, that'd be very much appreciated. Patreon is a place where you can tip creators whose work you enjoy, and the support that I receive over there allows me to keep creating free content for you on here. It is linked in the description box down below. Right, I really am going now. I'm worried that I've not said lots of things that I want to say, but I always feel like that. There'll be more videos in the future. We can talk more then. Okay, lots of love. Bye.